Hey, it's Kyle. We mentioned this last week, but we messed up, and we forgot to record video for this episode. But don't you worry, pals. We'll be back on screen ASAP. Thanks for hanging in there, and enjoy the episode. Emily, I have the most dire question in need of answering that we've ever had on this podcast, all right?
I'm ready.
I need you to answer me 100% seriously. No hesitation. Would you still be friends with me if I were a worm?
Kyle's the worst.
This is a serious question, Emily, and I'm looking for a serious answer.
It's not a serious question.
So you hate me.
There is no serious answer. I hate this whole thing. No. You'd be a worm.
No? What do you mean, no?
You'd be a worm.
I'd still be a Kyle, though.
You wouldn't, though, because you'd be a worm.
Oh, so you're saying that I'm only good for my mind, my humor, and my good looks. And if I were a worm and I didn't have any of those things, you wouldn't want to be friends with me.
You wouldn't be you anymore, buddy.
That's not how that works, Em. I'd be me as a worm.
No, because that's not possible.
There's the worm in Labyrinth, and he's like, hey, I'm a worm.
First of all, that is a fictional puppet.
Yeah, okay. What if I'm that worm?
Then you'd be a different character.
I know, I'd be me as a worm.
This is why I hate this whole thing, because as soon as you start to ask follow-up questions, they're like, okay, but it's my eyes, but I'm the size of a fish, but I have, it's like, no.
You just don't want to have this thought experiment.
No, because it's a stupid thought experiment. I wouldn't be your friend, and I'm going to stop being your friend in a minute if you don't stop asking this question.
I think that has already ended. This is the end of Butter No Parsnips, everybody. It's been
Thanks
a good
for
run.
tuning in.
The band is breaking up.
Welcome to Butter No Parsnips. Every week on Butter No Parsnips, your hosts Kyle Imperator and Emily Moyers take you on an adventure through the weird, wacky, wonderful, and sometimes even wicked world of one wayside word. Strange characters, delightful bits, and general joyousness abound. Join them as they test each other's etymological expertise.
How about, Kyle, we get one last episode in? Hey, everybody.
All right.
Welcome to Butter No Parsnips. I'm Emily Moyers.
And I'm Kyle Imperator. And boy, Em, what a dynamic start to an episode.
When you ask such divisive questions, this is what happens.
And Emily, I think I may have a divisive episode for you today.
Oh, boy.
Oh, here we go.
Here we go.
Are you ready for your void?
I'm ready for my woim and my void.
Emily, your woim void today is Fissiparous. Fissiparous. Fissiparous.
Fissiparous.
Fissiparous.
Okay. I mean, I'm just going to get out of the way only because the question that we started with, does this mean worm-like?
It does not mean worm-like, Emily.
Okay, so this is an adjective. Gotta be.
Yes, it is an adjective, yes.
Greek? Latin?
Latin.
Yeah, I guess it would, because if it were Greek, it would be with a PH.
It would be with a PH, just like in the 90s when we started saying fat as in cool. That was of an ancient Greek
That was
root.
us going back to our ancient Greek linguistic roots.
Yeah. You got it.
So Fissiparous. It's with an A, which is interesting. P-A-R-U-S.
Yes.
It means liable to like fizz into nothing, to disapparate in a fizz instead of in like a poof.
No, you're like kind of in the right direction. So I'm not going to say you're totally off, but no.
Can I have a hint?
Emily, your hint is fragile.
Oh, but we started off with, would you still be my friend if I was a worm? Okay, does Fissiparous mean liable to turn into something else? I was going to say liable to disappear at a moment's notice, but...
Those are both wrong. And you're further from the truth now.
I give up, Kyle.
Fissiparous means tending to break or split into pieces, or causing division or fragmenting something.
Like how a worm can split.
Like how a worm can split. You got it, Em.
Fissiparous. Wow.
So, Fissiparous is a word that comes from the New Latin Fissiparous. That word has two parts. First part, the prefix, comes from the Latin fissus, meaning split, from findo, meaning to break apart, separate, divide, split, or figuratively, to split or burst or to divide.
I have two thoughts. One is that the Harry Potter spell diffindo is like a slash that like splits. And also the word fissure is like a split.
Fissure. Emily, I was just going to ask you, are there any other words you can think of that may be related to fissus? And yeah, you're right. Fissure. What's a fissure, Em?
I feel like it's like a split in the earth, like a canyon.
Yeah, a narrow crack or opening, but especially in rock or earth. So yeah. Or if there's an earthquake, it causes a fissure.
In my brain, there's like gas seeping out of it.
Sure. It can also mean, I guess figuratively, a state of disagreement is a fissure, right?
Oh,
something that has had a crack between it. Yeah. That word is derived from findo through late Latin fissura, which meant a cleft or crack. Can you think of any other words that may be related to fissus? There's another big one.
I can't. What else?
I'm going to tell it you, and you're going to go, gaha.
I'm sure I will.
Fission.
Gaha.
Gaha.
Yeah. But
Fission.
That's like the same as fissure. That's just a different...
No, it's
not. No?
Nope.
Oh.
Fission is the process whereby one item splits into two.
I know the meaning is different. I meant linguistically. That's basically just a different form of the word.
Sure. But I don't think you'd say if the earth split, you wouldn't call that a fission. I guess you could.
Sure.
It's used in other contexts. But yes, absolutely. It means like split in half, really, truly.
And isn't that like a fuel source? It's splitting the atom?
Splitting atoms, Em. You got it. Yeah. So it's most commonly referred to with regards to nuclear fission, which is the process of splitting the nucleus of an atom into smaller particles, and it's used to generate energy for consumption or for warfare. Depends on how we woke up that day. And it's derived from findo through fissio, meaning the act of breaking up or dividing.
Very cool.
Don't forget the second part of Fissiparous, Emily. I think that's the one you're more interested in. The Paris part.
Yeah, because it's not Fissiparous. Yeah. It's Fissiparous, which is weird to me.
It comes from the late Latin pario, which means to bear or to give birth to, or to spawn, produce, or generate. You haven't heard it used in many English words, but there is one that's a big one that you'll recognize it as originating, stemming from pario, and it's postpartum, meaning relating to the period after childbirth. That part there comes from this root.
That's interesting. I always thought it was part as in mother and child have parted.
So, no, that's
postpartum. They're no longer, it made sense. No, it made sense.
No, that's postpartum, PART''EM. Postpartum.
I guess I just thought that part went all the way back to Latin. Like the Latin root of part was partum.
I like to think that there's a doctor in the room and is like, all right, partum. And that's where we got it from, you know?
You're mocking me, Kyle.
So, apparently, the Latin Fissiparous was invented in New Latin in relation to the word viviparous, or in English, viviparous, which is an adjective used in biology to describe being born alive or producing living young. Viviparous.
As opposed to like laying eggs.
As opposed to laying eggs. Emily, do you know what that word would be with the parus end?
I don't, but I'm excited to find out. It's like
oviparous.
Oh, like ovum.
Yes, like ovum. What were you going to say?
Nope, what I was going to say didn't make any sense.
I know, that's why I want to hear it.
Well, because you said this word is viviparous.
Yeah.
Like vive, meaning alive. So I went to the opposite. I was going to say mortiparous.
That is just being born dead. That's awful.
Yeah, which is awful.
That's so sad.
I'm 0 for 2 on Latin today. Not looking forward to the mini game later.
Yeah, so Fissiparous is not really the opposite of viviparous, right?
No.
Like, the analogy makes sense in the sense that something can be born through fission, right? Which is what the sense is. So in this biological sense of the word fissiparous, it refers to organisms that reproduce through fission.
Like single cell organisms that like split.
Yeah, Emily, you got it. I was going to ask, can you think of any fissiparous organisms in which this phenomenon might occur?
It'd have to be like bacteria and stuff.
You got it exactly, Emily.
Yeah.
Do you know anything more about bacteria splitting?
Yes, because I do reproduce vociferously, so I can tell you all about it.
I knew this would be an episode for you.
Yes, I'm actually Emily 7. I've been switching out at random intervals throughout this podcast. You haven't noticed.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
So, Emily, you had it completely correct. This process, reproducing through fission, happens in single-celled organisms such as bacteria through a process known as binary fission, in which the genetic material is first duplicated and then the cell is divided equally into two. Processes like those happen in multicellular organisms as well, inside their cells, specifically the mitochondrion.
The powerhouse of the cell.
Reproduces through binary fission. But multicellular organisms themselves can reproduce fissiparously.
Oh.
Through a form of asexual reproduction known as clonal fragmentation, or just fragmentation. Whoa. Can you guess how that works, Em?
Like Dolly the sheep?
Yeah, how would that work in sheep, Em? Tell me.
Well, like we made a clone. So we reproduced a sheep. There was third-party intervention, but we did it.
Where does the fragmentation part come in?
Well, now there's two. Dolly is the fragment.
It's the fragment? Oh, God. Imagine we just started calling clones fragments. It's so dystopian.
Kyle, I have no idea. Is this a real thing? What is
a real thing? Yes, it's a real thing.
I'm confused. Explain.
This is a natural process by which real animals reproduce, Em.
Asexually? Explain.
So there are many species, for example, of annelids and platyhelminths.
Are these like the Argonauts, the Helmids, the platy?
Yeah. They're all books in the Bible.
They were all sailing around at the same time.
Yeah, exactly. So annelids and platyhelminths are segmented worms and flatworms.
Oh, sure.
And those are examples of types of animals that can reproduce through fragmentation, though it depends on a number of factors. For example, if you cut an earthworm in half, you'll more than likely, though not always, just end up with two pieces of a dead worm. Sorry to break the news to everybody out there.
I mean, I feel like it is important to propagate that so that people aren't just going around cutting earthworms in half saying, it's going to make two worms, I swear.
Yeah, and I think we need to tell children because that's what everybody did as kids, honestly.
Yeah, because, I didn't, but I thought about it a lot.
So it was always on my brain.
I guess something in me did always doubt that it would actually sprout two living worms. I was like, I think this is a lie that I've been told.
Yeah. I mean, it can certainly happen. More often than not, it would just, like, the head of the worm would grow a tail, but it depends on how clean the cut is and where the cut was. But so more often than not. And it also depends on the earthworm, because we call a lot of things earthworms, but...
Sure. Depends on the species of worm.
But there is at least one species of white worm, though, aptly named Enchytraeus fragmentosus, that reproduces exclusively by fragmentation.
Exclusively? They're just counting on somebody to come around and cut them in half?
Yeah, and they're all clones. So, like, there's very little genetic diversity.
That's terrifying. This is a sci-fi plot. This is an episode of Star Trek.
So, literally, it's exactly what it seems. All white worms, not just Enchytraeus fragmentosus. They can spontaneously fragment their body into upwards of 5 pieces. Depending on the species, it can be up to 13 pieces.
So many.
So many pieces.
Wow.
And then these pieces then grow their own heads and tails.
That's crazy. I was going to say, you said the idea that they can like spontaneously fragment themselves. I was going to say that's like a skink that can just detach its tail whenever it's grabbed. But this is like if it could split its whole body into 13 pieces and they'd all come alive.
Exactly.
So
it's
much
more
more
horrifying.
terrifying.
Yeah.
Like truly.
That thing that you're thinking of with skinks, we're going to talk about that a little later. It's a sort of separate thing because the skink then doesn't grow a body from that tail, right?
No, but it can grow a new tail, right?
It can grow a new tail, and it happens because like there's a thing that causes it to happen, right? Like they're trying to escape. Yeah. This can happen, like the process of fragmentation, depending on the animal, can happen because of like they're trying to escape a predator. But it also can just happen, and we don't know why.
They can just decide it's time for me to reproduce 12 more of me.
Yeah. A fun thing about the white worms, too, and worms in general, is that a worm fragment can sometimes grow 2 heads, which one study refers to as a bipolar worm, and which M. Night Shyamalan refers to as the basis for his next film.
Just the bipolar worm or the 2-headed thing?
Both, honestly. So, many sea creatures undergo fissiparism as well, including sponges, corals, and sea anemones. They're all fissiparous creatures.
This all makes sense. That sounds reasonable to me.
And echinoderms are a particularly fissiparous bunch, encompassing sea cucumbers, brittle stars, and what I first think of when I think of fragmentation in animals, starfish.
Oh, does it grow a whole other starfish if you cut off a leg?
Grows a whole other starfish, yeah.
I didn't know that. I knew it could regrow a leg. I didn't know that the leg would grow a whole starfish.
Yeah.
Isn't it that like it has to have a part, it has to have a specific part of the starfish in order to do that, or it'll just die?
You're on it. We're going to talk about it a little bit later, but you've got it exactly. You're right on the spot, Em. I want to do just a little non sequitur first. I think this is as good a time as any to settle the starfish versus sea star debate, right?
Oh, I didn't know there was a debate.
Yeah, it's like, what do you call them? Do you call them starfish? Do you call them sea stars? Where do you land on that debate?
Anyone who calls them sea stars is looking for attention.
It's looking for attention!
Yeah, I'll come.
Oh, wow, this is a divisive episode.
No, it's starfish, right?
Yeah, I mean, so like there are people who say, well, you should call them sea stars because they're not actually fish, you know? And it gives it the wrong impression about what they are.
I mean, you know my thoughts on fish.
I know your thoughts on fish. Tell me your thoughts on fish, Em.
Fish are a category that we made up for menus. They don't mean the term fish means nothing biologically. Fish are so unrelated to each other.
Yeah, so Emily and I argued about this before. I took the opportunity during this episode to dig into it, all right?
You did not like this news.
I did not. I was upset. But now I understand.
There's no such thing as a fish.
There is and there isn't. So the sea starfish debate is silly. So the animal has been compared to stars as far back as the Latin word stella, S-T-E-L-L-A, which meant star, but also in a transferred sense meant star shape. It meant starfish, and it also meant glowworm, which is not a worm, but I felt it important to bring up.
That's hilarious. A starfish isn't a fish, and a glowworm isn't a worm.
Thomas Eliot, E-L-Y-O-T, was just specifying then when he wrote for the first time that starfish was ever used in English in his 1538 Latin dictionary. He said, stella, a stare, also a starefish. Saying like a star in the water, a fish star, you know?
A starefish is also a funny image.
Yeah.
It's like a fish that's zigzagged.
Yeah, it's like from some Looney Tunes.
Yes.
So when he says starfish, the word fish at that time, in the 1500s, and for some time both before and sometime after, didn't just refer to the thing that we think of as fish today, but it referred to practically anything that lived in the water. Lobsters, alligators, beavers. These were all
Beavers.
fish. They were fish.
Yeah,
In fact,
yeah.
the flesh of a beaver, when being cooked, was called the fish of a beaver.
Wow.
Yes. One 1555 text describes the manatee as a fish of the sea of the biggest sort, which is odd because whales were also considered fish then. Just forgetting that whole one.
Those don't count though, because they're like really big.
They're like super big.
Yeah, and also sharks that are bigger than manatees, those don't count either.
The word sea star wasn't far behind starfish coming to English. It was in 1569 that we first saw it, and it was translated from the French phrase étoile de mer, which literally means star of the sea.
Star of the sea, sea star.
Yeah, and it was called as such because it hath the figure of a painted star.
It doth.
It doth. But if you listeners at home want to avoid the whole shebang, you could, of course, just use the term that comes from their scientific classification, asteroidea, and call a starfish an asteroid. Literally, star-shaped, and it was first used to refer to starfish in 1841, just a decade after it was first used to talk about meteors, and only 40 years after it was first used in English to describe other vaguely star-like celestial objects. Asteroids.
That's crazy. I've never broken down the word asteroid in my head, but asteroid, star-shaped. That's crazy.
Literally
That's crazy.
Yeah. And considering all the things that the ancient Greeks and Latins thought were stars just weren't stars.
Wow, really good.
So, starfish are strange creatures. As Thomas Brown once wrote, "Why amongst sea stars nature chiefly delighteth in 5 points?" That guy was obsessed with 5, man.
Wow. Episode 11, Quincunx, everybody. That man was obsessed with 5.
So starfish can lose one of their arms, just as skinks lose their tails, through a process called autotomy, or self-amputation. And as long as a piece of the body, or what we call the disc, is present, which is what you were alluding to is earlier, the middle there, as long as a piece of that is present on the arm, they can regrow a new body from that arm and a new arm for that body. It's just 2 new starfish.
If the arm is cut without the disc, I know that arm wouldn't grow a new body, but would the body grow a new arm still?
Yep, because the body's still attached. It's in there.
Yeah.
That loose arm, Emily, of an asteroid is perhaps tongue-in-cheek referred to as a comet, which I think is fun.
That's really good.
Isn't that good? So fragmentation in starfish is called fissiparity, and it's different from autotomy in the sense that it usually sees the sea star torn into equal halves through the middle of the disc, or as equal as it can be for sea stars with an odd number of limbs. Many have 5. Some do have 6. Actually, a lot do have 6 limbs, but they can have upwards, up to 15. They can have a lot of limbs.
That's crazy.
This fissiparation and regeneration is an incredible feat. And we didn't really have any idea for how long this had been occurring until earlier this year, when researchers found an Ophiactis hex fossil from the late Jurassic showing an ancient brittle star, which is a class closely related to starfish, in the midst of growing back half of its body, proving that echinoderms have been exhibiting fissiparity for over 150 million years.
Wow.
Isn't that insane?
Starfish are crazy.
Are crazy.
The ocean is terrifying.
It's scary. Yeah.
Everything in there is as ancient as time, and we don't even know most of it.
Yeah, that is the scary part. It's like, if they've been doing this for 150 million years, we just found it and we know that they exist. What else is down there?
Yep. 100%.
Yeah. So the amazing regenerative properties of starfish continue to be the focus of studies. One 2015 study showed that starfish that reproduced by cloning, because starfish can also sexually reproduce. Let me just put that out there. And so can many worms.
So this isn't like the white worm that only clones.
Yeah. It's just harder for starfish to reproduce.
I mean, that makes sense to me because they're always flat on one spot.
Well, I think they reproduce like fish do, where they expel seed. And so you have to have a lot of starfish together, and that just doesn't happen all the time. So it's just easier to reproduce through fragmentation. Yeah, it would be for us too, right? But one 2015 study showed that starfish that did reproduce by cloning actually lived longer than starfish that reproduced sexually, and they lived healthier lives with reduced signs of aging.
I mean, I guess it makes sense that like the way they were born would affect their biology, but the fact that it affects their lifespan and health is like crazy to me.
Yeah, we don't know why. We are stunned about this. They seem practically immortal, which is possibly why the Korean word for starfish, bulgusari, comes from the legendary monster, the bulgusal, an unkillable steel-eating rhino whose name is Chinese for impossible to kill.
Wow.
Yeah.
A steel rhino?
Yeah, it's a crazy thing.
I gotta put that in D&D, man.
There's
good.
also a romance movie. Sorry, I just am realizing that this is a crazy thing that two talk about. There's a romance movie called Bugasal, Immortal Souls. It tells the story of a woman who remembers her past lives by repeating death and reincarnation for 600 years, and a man who cannot kill nor be killed and has lived for the past 600 years as that creature.
Wow.
It's its series, 16 episodes, 2022.
Wow. I mean, that's our next watch.
That's our next watch. But yeah, so this feature of starfish is amazing. And in particular, the regenerative properties of starfish are being studied in relation to human stem cells to see how we can coax them to be as mutable as the cells in the asteroids are. Professor Chris Noel Dahl said in 2020 of starfish larvae, if the head is removed or damaged, the differentiated cells that are definitely not neural cells will de-differentiate, crawl up to the head region, and regrow into neurons. The hope is that by studying a model organism like the starfish and combining what we learn with our knowledge of human stem cells, we can use comparative genomics, which is the study of genomes, to understand the gene expression that allows starfish cells to respecify their programming.
That is so fascinating. The starfish can just reassign its cells different jobs.
And it makes it all the more alarming, Emily, to find out that in 2013, the world's populations of sea stars declined rapidly due to a disease of unknown origin. We still have not been able to figure it out. It's called sea star wasting disease. And it continues to plague starfish, literally turning them into colorless piles of goo. And we just don't know why it's happening.
Is that related to like all the like bleaching of the reefs and stuff?
We have no idea. At first they thought it could be some sort of like virus, and it seems like it's not. It could be related to the temperature of the ocean, but we don't exactly know why. It could be related to them being exposed to air, like the tides. We just literally don't know.
Wow, that is a big problem. Yeah. Save the starfish, everybody.
Save the starfish,
I don't know how, but we gotta.
Outside of biology, Emily, fissiparousness has been mentioned in relation to political factions, religious groups and countries, things that split up, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Notably, the euphemism fissiparous tendencies was used by the government of India to stoke fears against those who disagreed with them. So people who were revolting against the government, they would say, oh, these people, they have fissiparous tendencies, as in they're trying to like get the country to break up. They were using it as a weapon against them. Aditya Sinha states in a 2013 article, however, when you consider that fissiparous is itself a tendency to break apart, fissiparous tendencies would actually mean tendencies to have a tendency to break apart, which is somewhat less sinister. Emily, that is all of the fissiparism that I have for you today.
Really good word. A lot of biology today, but like cool biology. You're cool, Kyle.
I was really into marine biology as a kid, so I was like really into this.
Yeah, it's fascinating stuff. The ocean is terrifying, but cool.
And Emily, now I'm going to ask you to write a sentence about that terrifying but cool ocean. Can you use Fissiparous in a sentence?
I definitely can. Kyle, you opened this episode up with a horribly vociferous question that has left us divided for the rest of the episode and probably will remain divided for the rest of our lives.
Truer words were never spoken, Emily.
Can you use it that way?
RIP to
Can
our
you use it to
relationship.
mean like divisive?
Yeah, well, in the sense that it's that question will break us apart. Yes.
Yeah.
Great job, Em. Good job. Time for a game.
Time for a game.
Emily, your game today is called Fissiparous Phrase Fossils. Emily, there's been an incredible biolexical discovery. It turns out that some words have been fissiparous for centuries right under our noses. Can you believe it?
I can't. Make me believe it.
Well, you're going to act as archaeologist today, Fissiparchaeologist. I'm going to give you some clues as to the head and tail of a fissiparous word fossil, and you're going to have to tell me which body they originally came from, okay? For example, if I tell you we found the bones of a word meaning overweight next to a female-coded pronoun, you would say the original fossil was of father, fat and her put together, father.
Okay. Gotcha.
Make sense?
Okay. Yep.
We found a chunk of limestone with an old word for you next to finely ground rock.
Huh. 1,000.
1,000!
Thou sand.
Good job, Em. Okay, here's your next one.
Mm-hmm.
We found a piece of amber that contained the present time and present location, and that together form the opposite of their parent.
Whoa. Say that whole thing again.
The present time and the present location.
But then what was the other part?
Together they form the opposite of their parent.
I don't know what you mean by parent.
The parent word.
I mean, nowhere.
Yeah. From
Now
what
and
two
here.
words? Now and here. Now,
Yeah.
here is the opposite of nowhere.
In a roundabout way, Kyle.
No,
sure.
in a literal way. Now, here, nowhere.
Okay.
You got it. I'll give it to you. I don't want to, but I'll give it to you. Emily, here's your last one. Our final discovery was an ancient shell that held a mystical power and a casual shirt.
Mystical power. Uh-oh.
Let me know if you want a hint.
I do, on the first part.
The word, when it's together, before it breaks up, before it fissiparizes, before it fizzes, was once called the biggest in the sea.
Oh, mana and
Yeah.
tea. Manatee.
Manatee. You got it.
Okay. All right.
3 for 3. Nice job.
I'm the best.
You are
the
the
thing.
best. And I hope those at home don't believe otherwise.
That's right. And I hope those at home remember that they can watch. You hear that, folks? You can watch Butter No Parsnips on YouTube, on youtube.com/@ButterNoParsnips. And you can find us on social media, on Facebook and Instagram @ButterNoParsnipsPodcast, and on TikTok @ButterNoParsnips. And if you liked today's episode, consider giving us a 5-star rating or review wherever you heard us.
And if you really like today's episode, consider donating to our Patreon at patreon.com/ButterNoParsnips. Donating $5 or more gets you exclusive access to Buttered Parsnips, our After Hours podcast.
Thanks so much to all of you. You help us make what we make.
And with that, I've been Kyle Imperator.
And I've been Emily Moyers, and this has been Butter No Parsnips.
Butter No Parsnips is produced by Seth Glicksman, Emily Moyers, and myself, Kyle Imperator. The main and accompanying themes were composed by Kyle Imperator.